Angel Mistake. I'm going to say that part again. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Angel Muscane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click on the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise your hand function there. If you're still having technical difficulties, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Sorry. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions regarding agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or a comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We're not going to be calling, well, I already called to order, so we're not going to do roll call. Angel, if you can.
Certainly. When I call your name, please answer present. Yolanda Brown.
Present.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
James Horton.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Beverly Pabon. Andrew Padilla is excused. Robert Perez.
Present.
Vinny Torres. Jason Villanueva is excused. Candy Vasquez. You have quorum.
Thank you. Perfect. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to the adoption of the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom now. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from our last meeting were also distributed ahead of time. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes from the meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom now. Okay, seeing no objections, the minutes from the last meeting are adopted. These are our announcements. Angel, if you would.
Sure. I just wanted to thank Robert for preparing last month's minutes. The next meeting of the Land Use Committee is scheduled for December 8th at 6:30. At that meeting, HPD and the designated developers of the 25th Precinct parking lot and the East Harlem Multi-Service Center will present plans for the projects to be developed at those sites. Members of the board will recall that these are two of the so-called POA sites that were identified in the 2017 rezoning for the development of 100% affordable housing. So these are the first two projects, the first two sites that have been selected for development, and these are the development teams that have been designated as a result of the RFP issued by HPD. So we'll hear those full presentations next month.
Wonderful. It's actually great news. Any informational updates from any of the members or from Angel or George?
I do not.
Perfect. We can continue on. So now we'll be receiving an informational presentation and status update on the East 125th Street Development Project, AKA MEC. This project will span from 125th to 127th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues and will include approximately 1,000 units of housing, 700,000 square feet of commercial space, 5,000 square feet of retail reserved for local businesses, 30,000 square feet of community facility uses, plus public open space. The overall project is subject to a 2018, sorry, points of agreement. And so who do we have here? Is everyone who is listed here present?
Yes, they are.
So who's speaking?
So just before handing it over to the presentation team, just wanted to mention to committee members, because many have come on since the initiation of this project 700 years ago. So this is a very large project that has been in the works for many, many years. We've had some updates periodically from the representative group from the representative for the development team, but there have been a lot of changes to the project and to the siting of the project since way back in 2018. 2008. That's a mistake. That's a typo there. Sorry about that. So we wanted to have the team, including in addition to EDC and HPD, come in and give a comprehensive update on the state of the project as it is envisioned today. With that, handing it over to Stephen Hayes, who represents the development group. He'll be joined by Lauren Wolf, who's representing the EDC, and Felipe Cortez, who's representing HPD.
Great. I can begin, and I don't know, Angel, if you're controlling the PowerPoint, but there you go. PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to be talking about two of the phases of this project, and when we get the PowerPoint presentation, I'll explain it to you.
You can present if you have it there, or I can do it on this end.
I don't have it, unfortunately. If you don't mind.
Okay.
Popping it up.
Sure. Just give me a second or two. You can.
So yeah, I'll just keep talking. I'm representing the development team. I'll introduce them in a second when you can see their names on the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to be talking about two of the phases of this project, which is a multi-phase project, as Angel described. Both these phases are on 125th Street, between 125th Street and 126th Street, between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, closer to 3rd Avenues. One is under construction, and as you probably all know already, and you've seen it, and I'll go through them. Thank you, Angel. This is perfect. So if you can just go to the next slide, and I don't think I can control this, right? So this is the presentation. I'm going to be quick through this, and I certainly can answer questions afterwards. As I mentioned, I'll talk about the development team because I know a lot of you know about this project, but some of you might not. So I wanted to just be clear on who the development team is, and then talk about the two phases. The first one is described as the B West phase. That's the one that's under construction, and that was as a result of an RFP with EDC. And I'll fill you in on that. And then the next phase is the one just to the east of that, which is called B Central. That is an HPD project with us, and it's in the planning stages as we stand right now. So Angel, if you can go to the next slide. This is the development team, and I don't know, you probably know some of them, so let me just go through them quickly. Bridges Development Group is a New York-based retail developer. El Barrio back is a mixed-use, predominantly affordable housing developer based in East Harlem. I'm sure you all know them. Hope Community is also an East Harlem-based affordable housing and mixed-use development developer. Monadnock Construction Development is they are acting as an equity partner in this as well, being Monadnock Development, but they also happen to be the general contractor because they have a large construction side to them. And then Richmond Development Group is a large national affordable housing developer, also with a New York presence, a New York office. So that's the development team, and we can go to the next slide. This is a graphic of the project, and what this is the site plan for Parcel B. To be candid with you, I don't even know where the name Parcel B came from, but it's a legacy, so we continue to call it Parcel B. The site, again, as I said, to the south or the bottom of this drawing is East 125th Street. To the north of it is East 126th Street. The left side is 3rd Avenue, which is the west side, of course, and the right side is 2nd Avenue. The west side of Parcel B, hence the project's name, Parcel B West, is the one that's on 3rd Avenue, 125th Street, and that's the one that's under construction. Just to the right of that on this drawing, or the center of Parcel B, is the B Central project, and that's the one in the planning stages. And just the right of that, which is not part of the project, is a gas station on the bottom. We can go to the next slide. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can, yeah. Give me a
Yeah,
second.
okay. Oh, you can go to the next slide. I'm sorry.
I'm trying, my
Okay.
computer is misbehaving. I am sorry.
That's okay.
There.
So perfect. So this is the summary of the program for the B West portion of the project, which is the one that's under construction now. And it's 404 units, about 3/4 of which are affordable. It has approximately 63,000 square feet of commercial retail space, and that's divided into 3 sort of types of retail. The majority of the retail is going to be the Food Bazaar, which is a grocery store I'm sure you're all aware of. And that is going to be located on the 2nd floor of the project. And I will show that as I go through the drawings of the project shortly. The other 2 components of the project, one is 10,000 square feet of market rate retail, and the other is 5,000 square feet of something called local retail. Neither of those have tenants yet, and I'll talk about that in a second, but let me address the local retail. The local retail means that the rent for any of the tenants in that 5,000 square feet, and it can be divided into multiple tenants, of course, will pay 50% of market rent, and they need to be, the business needs to be owned by someone who is in the East Harlem area. That's what qualifies them to be defined as local, and that gets them the discounted rent. That retail rent, the retail space that is not Food Bazaar, is there is no lease for that at present. And let me quickly explain why. I'm sure you can guess why. COVID has been tough on retail, as you're all aware. You can see a lot of vacancies. So while there have been a bunch of groups that have approached us and looked at the space and they're talking about it, nobody's signed a lease yet, and that's understandable because it's still a tough situation out there for retail. Also, as I know you're all aware, 125th Street East, 125th Street has faced some significant challenges in terms of some crime and some aesthetics on the street, and that's kept some retailers. They've been a little cautious. Now, that being the case, through a lot of efforts on the community board's part, on the council members' part, on Uptown Grand Central, the police department, there's been significant improvement. And also, I know there's also improvement in the retail environment. So I'm optimistic, or we're optimistic about renting the additional 15,000 square feet. It's just, there's no lease for it at present. The third component of the project is 5,000 square feet of cultural space. While we don't have a lease yet for the cultural user, we are in conversations with a user that we feel will be excellent in the space. I'm optimistic about the lease negotiations, and I think I look forward to being able to announce that group. You probably all know who the group is anyway, but I can't announce it until we have a lease. Parking is also in this project, and then there's also 10,000 square feet of open space that I'll show you in the drawings, and there's mechanical, of course. So if we can go to the next page. This outlines the affordability mix of the housing component. And I wanted to say that this project, as is all the projects, including the B Central piece, is sort of overseen or sort of follows the points of agreement that Elsie mentioned, or Angel mentioned early on. The points of agreement is a document that was signed at the tail end of the Euler process for this project, in, I guess, 2008. And between the community talked about housing program and general affordability should be. So this affordability mix follows that points of agreement, as does the program. I say this because the points of agreement also dictate the next phase, which is the B Central phase, which we'll be talking about shortly. So if we can go to the next page. I wanted to quickly run through the architectural presentation. These are the drawings that I'm going to show you. I want to jump to the next one, Angel. Next is the ground floor. Again, to the left. If you can notice on the corner of 125th and 3rd is what's labeled as Anchor Lobby. That is the entrance to Food Bazaar. And as you've probably seen as you walk by the building, there's 2 large escalators that are going up or will be going up to the 2nd floor, as well as some elevators. That brings everybody from that corner lobby up to Food Bazaar, which is on the 2nd floor. I'll show that graphic in a second. Additionally, on the ground floor is the other retail space, much of it concentrated on 3rd Avenue and 125th Street as expected. There's also the residential lobby up on the corner of 126th and 3rd, and then the open space just to the east of the project, which sort of separates this B West project from the B Central project. On the upper 126th Street side, you can see the entrance of the lobby to the cultural center space, which will be an elevator and stairway down to the cultural center space, which is in the basement floor, or the cellar floor, and that's going to be most likely offices, but more importantly, exhibit space and performance spaces. So we can jump to the next slide. This is actually an example of, this is the cellar space, and while this is labeled community facility, it's actually cultural facility. And then it also has some of the amenity spaces, bike storage and pet cleaning and that kind of thing that's in the cellar, and parking. Go to the next one, Angel. Next. This is the 2nd floor space for Food Bazaar. It's a big open space, as you know. And I did want to talk briefly about Food Bazaar. Food Bazaar signed its lease just before COVID, and they're actually very bullish on this project. And you know, the neighborhood obviously needs some quality grocery store. They wanted to open before Halloween, and then they wanted to open by Thanksgiving, and then they wanted to open by Christmas. However, as we all are, I'm sure, aware, there's supply chain problems, and included in that problem for Food Bazaar is the refrigeration systems and some of their storage shelving, which is not arrived yet. So there's delay in opening this. That being the case, Food Bazaar is still in there fitting out to the extent they can, but there is a delay in opening until next year. We can go to the next slide. This is the 3rd floor, and this starts the plan for the residential building that goes up from here. This floor includes a lot of the amenity spaces, and this might sound, I don't know, I'm super proud of this project. So I think I really can't wait for you all to be able to see this 3rd floor when we have a ribbon cutting, which will hopefully be the early part of next year. This floor has some really amazing amenity spaces. It's got outdoor spaces, a fitness center, an office center with laptops. It's got a library, game room, child playroom. It's really wonderful. And this floor obviously includes some residential units. And if we go to the next one, next floor, next image, sorry. This is showing the upper floors as it goes up, I think, to floor 19. And this this isn't a particularly helpful drawing, but it just shows the mix of uses, a mix of unit types as they go up. And I think the next image we can go to as well, which should be the rendering. This building has a really awesome roof deck as well. The building looks like this now almost because its construction is far along, but this is the rendering that we've been using. And the next image, the next slide, please. If we could get it, I don't know. Angel, okay? There we go. This is, I wanted to give you an estimate of the overall timing. As I mentioned, Food Bazaar is delayed, but still optimistic, and that will hopefully be the early part of next year. Cultural space, same time frame. And the other retail will follow, no doubt, the activity of Food Bazaar as signage and movement starts to happen. I know we'll have additional interest in the other retail, so we're planning on that in the spring and the summer. And then the residential will be as soon as the building starts to be finished and TCOs can be obtained. So that'll be the first quarter of 2022. Next image. I wanted to just talk about community involvement on this parcel B West, because it's also going to relate to B Central, which is I'm going to talk about just after this. I guess it's kind of cliche to say that this is an open door approach, but it really has been in terms of a lot of interaction with the East 125th Street Task Force, which is a group that was formed before this project even got issued in terms of RFP. And there's been regular meetings with this group. And it really, sincerely, I can say that this project is improved because of the interaction, the constant interaction with this task force and the community and the council member. It's been a success from our perspective, and I hope from yours, and we're going to continue this same approach as we go forward into the B Central piece. There are three items that we're sort of working with, we're still working with, or we will be working with the task force on related to B West. One is local hiring during construction, although construction is waning. We started this with the council member asking Monadnock to make some real efforts to hire some local people through construction. So we contracted with a group called Urban Strategies, and they've been really great in terms of getting local people hired on the site. I think that I'll find out exactly the number, but I think it's just shy of 100 residents have been hired on site through construction. The same efforts will be made for local hiring once there's operations within the building, particularly Food Bazaar will be the first one, of course. And there's the whole protocol and process that's related to EDC's Hire NYC program, as well as working with the task force to ensure that local people benefit from the hiring opportunities that are created. And the third component that we're working with the task force on is the local retail piece. They've provided a lot of feedback and ideas on local retailers. And while we haven't any signed up yet, there are some interested, and I think that the execution of leases are sort of around the corner. So that's B West, and we can go on to the next slide. And I wanted to talk about B Central, which again is with HPD, and it is it's in the planning stages now. So these drawings in big red are subject to change because they will change. They definitely will. I wanted to talk about the program of the project as it stands now. And what we had done is the architect, which I should do a shout out for the architect, which is S9 Architecture. They did a really wonderful job on B West, and they're going to be the architect on B Central as well. Excuse me, we had them do a study of the building, and this graphic shows the study of the building. I will say one of my colleagues said that this graphic is too much information and very confusing, and she is entirely right. So I apologize for that. But let me just summarize what this shows you. It shows, the second column shows the residential floor area, and that results in 450 units. The third column talks about the cultural component in the project, and that's going to be approximately 15,000 square feet. And then the fourth column talks about the other component of the project, which is commercial, and that's approximately retail commercial. That's approximately 23,000 square feet. And then there's a parking component as well. So that's going to be the general program. Again, these are approximations because this is all subject to change as we continue to finesse the design. Next drawing or next image. This also is probably too much information, but this is also the architect's study of residential layout. Results in 450 units, as I mentioned, which is the bottom right corner. And this is the breakdown from studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units as it stands now. Again, this is subject to change, but we wanted to do a study to make sure that this all works, and it does indeed work. Next image, please. What we did is, as I mentioned, is as we're studying this, we did some bulk analysis of the project as it would sit on the block and work within the zoning issues. So these projects are as of right. This project is as of right in terms of zoning and isn't going to require any land use action. So we did a study, and these are images of the study. The 1 second. building with the pink base, and this is looking from 125th Street toward the building. The building just to the left, sort of the elevated H building, is the B West project that I was just describing that's already under construction. We wanted to see how this fit from an urban design perspective together, and also how it programmatically would fit within the confines and the program that's desired through the points of agreement. And so this is the resulting building. The little white building to the right is not part of this project. It is a city parcel, but we studied it because we wanted to make sure from an urbanistic standpoint, what is or could be built on that project is going to work with what we're proposing to build, as well as you can see, it does indeed work. The image on the right is looking from 126th Street south. So it's the same. But it's looking from a different. I wanted to show you where we are in terms of studying bulk. The next, and I think it's the last image. So just to summarize where we are with B Central. As I mentioned, S9 is studying the design and the program, and this is a work in progress. And the design work does work within current zoning, which is a good thing, obviously. At the same time as the design being studied, we're talking with, the team is talking with the different, exploring financing options with private lenders, as well as the city agencies that help fund these projects, and working diligently on that. And we continue to work with HPD to tweak the design to make it a better design, and also tweak the program to make it a more efficient and a better program as well. With that program analysis, we'll further go into what the housing types will be, the affordability of the housing, and that will continue to be evolved. And then we also, as we continue moving forward, we're going to get to a schedule to closing, completely understanding that this community has been very patient with this project, and we all, city and developer, want to move this as fast as feasibly possible. So we're working as hard as we can to do that. We'll come up with a closing schedule. And lastly on this, as I mentioned before, we're going to work closely with the task force, as well as anyone who wants to give input to keep you briefed. And I welcome anybody calling me or asking me any kind of questions along the way. It's not a problem, or emailing me. So that's it for me. I can answer any questions if you have any now or down the line.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I know that you were cutting in and out a little bit, so there may be some questions about those pieces, or maybe questions that you did speak on that we didn't catch. But before I go to questions, I wanted to give either Lauren or anyone from HPD an opportunity. Felipe, if you have an opportunity to speak on the project, if you had anything to add.
Thank you, Elsie, for the opportunity. I just want to echo what Stephen mentioned regarding to the B Center piece of the project. A couple of weeks ago, I would say maybe a month and a half ago, we had a relaunch of the B Center piece with the development team, where we kind of restarted the conversation about the project, keeping in mind that it's been a couple of years since the project has been active, but we are refocusing on the B Center piece. We're working with the team. We are exploring some possibilities on what to do with the program, unit mix and MI distribution. We have a few pending items, and as soon as we get some answers to some of the open questions that we have, we'll obviously get back to you with a new updates. I believe I heard Angel mentioning that we might be able to provide updates on December 8th. We're targeting to have updates for that date. If not, we'll let you know if we don't have any, but the conversation will be open and will continue to be open with CB11. So, we'll always keep you posted.
And we appreciate that. Lauren, I don't know if you did have any questions.
Angel, I guess, do you want me to, I could speak on some of the other parts of the project, or maybe it makes sense. What I was going to talk about was going to be different than what Stephen covered. So maybe it makes sense to ask the questions on what he said, and then I could maybe go into some additional detail on other parts of the project. But what do you guys think? Either way, though.
So you were discussing, I'm assuming parcel A to the north of.
Yeah, actually, why don't I just, I'll
Yeah.
just go through my section really quickly. I had, sorry?
Do you need the screen?
Yeah, I would like the screen. Let's see if I can do this. Oh yeah. You know what? I am just going to talk to, I only have 3 slides, so I'll just talk to them. I'm not quite sure how to share my screen. I'm sorry. Okay. So what I was here to talk about, is mainly the other parcels that are part of this development. Actually, can we go back to Stephen's presentation with a map of the whole development?
Just give me a second. Computer's misbehaving. In a second. Okay. Which slide?
I think it's at the beginning. Oh, I don't know if you want to use that, Lauren.
The one with the site plan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the site plan.
There you go. Oh, that's it.
There was a slide that, yeah, okay, so we can, so, Stephen addressed B West and B Center, and then there's B East, which is what is grayed out on that image. Also above that parcel is parcel A. Parcel A is broken up into 3 different, sorry, maybe actually, could someone just, how do I share my screen? This is just ridiculous.
If you hover towards the bottom, there should be like a menu bar, and in the middle of that, it'll say share screen. Or the top, there'll be a menu. Just kind of hover near like bottom of the top of the screen. It should, if it's not already presenting, it should like kind of descend. Unless you have a really old version of Zoom, Lauren. Or just send it to me and I'll throw it up.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So while it goes through, I really apologize, everyone.
No worries.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about the slide that doesn't have an image on it, which is about the local investment fund. Of course, my computer is now frozen. I'm hoping everyone can. So the local investment fund, which Stephen touched on, was established as part of the points of agreement. The local investment fund has 5 purposes, but the overarching, oh, here we go, Angel. Okay. I got an error message. We'll see if that goes to you. The local investment fund has 5 purposes. The overarching purpose is to make sure that, there was a thought that the creation of this big project across 2 blocks would displace local businesses. So it was mostly about getting local businesses into this development. The 5 purposes are marketing of businesses of local businesses of the new development, and loans and grants to support businesses of the new development. So like if a business needed, like let's say there was a food sort of business and they needed, kitchen equipment, like a loan or a grant that could help them get that. Capital for expansion of local businesses and job training. So, really focused on getting actual, community-based retailers into this development. There is 5,000 square feet of local retail in the Phase B West. that would be able to utilize some of this local investment fund. We did a lot of work with Angel included, with the community board, the council member's office, the borough president's office, to set up the local investment fund and the structure for that. So that is all sort of underway, and decisions to be made in the future about how that funding will get distributed to different businesses that might locate in the development. Angel, have you received my presentation yet?
It just came out, so I'll
Fantastic. Yeah, and the local investment fund itself is supposed to be $10 million when fully funded. The current balance is $250,000. But there haven't, while that's 250,000 is not 10 million, there is no, as Stephen was alluding to, there's been, challenges with finding local retailers for BUS. So there's not, quite anyone to take advantage of that money. So this slide is just, is a good map of the overall project. You have, so Stephen alluded to B West and B Center. His team was also responsible for Parcel C, which was completed a long time ago. So long ago, we don't even talk about it. But that's part of his team. Then there's A West, which is an RFP that EEC released some time ago. It is for commercial only. Like, it can't be residential because there are actual limits on how many residential units can be across all these parcels. And we've kind of used up all the residential units on the B parcels. Next is the Proton Center, which opened in July 2019. It's a very, impressive building and organization. We can talk a little bit more about that later. And then we have Parcel A East. Below A East is Parcel B East. A East and B East will be subject to a future RFP for mostly commercial, but with a little bit of housing. Next slide, please. Okay, so this isn't really relevant, but I just wanted to show everyone, this has been going on for a very long time, and why are we here today talking about, Parcel B West, which it will open in, early 2022, when this all started back in 2006. So I thought it was just helpful, to the extent people are new to this process, to see kind of what happened. And this is a very consolidated sort of timeline, but the main thing was that the city had to acquire a number of private parcels in order to facilitate this development. And that took a very, very long time. So the RFP for all this was back in 2006. And we really couldn't embark on the acquisition of parcels until 2014. And it just took that long till we were able to acquire everything and put the development team in a position where they could start. Next slide, please. This is a little bit about the Proton Center. I'm not sure how much folks are interested in talking about it, but it's really, it's been a great development in our mind. They've done a lot of good, in addition to providing a very necessary service, which is, cancer treatment, or a specific type of cancer treatment, in conjunction with some of the leading New York City hospitals. They've also done a lot in terms of partnership on hiring and mentorship. And it opened in 2019. Next slide, please. Okay, this was the local investment fund slide that I was alluding to earlier. We can go back and talk about this. So I think that's really it. There's one more slide just showing the overall development. We can probably end on that if we, next slide, please. This just shows it all. Again, B Center is the future phase that Felipe referenced. B East and A East will be RFP'd in the future. A West is, sort of in process. And that's in a nutshell, the larger development.
You're on mute, Elsie.
Elsie, you're mute.
I was just saying it's a lot of, but thank you, Lauren, and it's, getting used to the A's and B's and C's and West and Norths, but we get it, I'm hoping. And I appreciate the presentation. I wanted to now take a moment to let the committee ask any questions. I did have, let's see if I wrote it down. And this may have been in the first presentation for Stephen on the breakdown of unit sizes for the affordable housing on the first parcel that we spoke about, which I believe was West.
I'm sorry, the unit sizes?
Yes. For
They're not, it's not in the graphic. I don't know I can't remember what they are, but I can certainly send it to you. Yep, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Elsie, do you mean maybe about the unit mix? How many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I can get you that. I don't recall what it is, but I can certainly get you that.
Right. And I think you did answer the renting timeline for the for the commercial spaces. You did have a timeline for that, correct? It was.
Yeah, the commercial spaces, the food bazaar already is in place. That's the lease that already exists. The other category, the other 15,000, we're marketing them right now through Ripco, and we've had successes in terms of showing them, and some people that have expressed significant interest, but nothing has signed yet. So as soon as those leases get signed, I will certainly let you all know. I'm sure it's going to happen. It's just been, as you know, a little challenge in the retail market right now.
I see Yolanda Brown.
Hi, good evening. First question, do we still have access to Stephen's presentation?
I will try to
And
get
the
it
reason why I asked
to
that
cooperate. My computer's not cooperating. Yeah, Rep, sorry.
Hello?
Yeah, Angel's having a little bit of a technical difficulty,
okay.
but he's gonna try to get it up for you.
And the reason why, and why we try to get that, the reason why I asked that question is because the same slide of information that I believe you were referring to, Elsie, I wanted to see that again, since it did come through the presentation, given the targeted goals for the AMI targets. There were some questions that I had, but I want to make sure that I wrote my notes down specifically, correctly, to address the questions regarding the 80% AMI and the target population, and how did you foresee achieving those goals, given the AMI at 80% is almost 60, between 670 and 80,000? But if we could pull it up, I think, we'll have a better view of what it is I'm trying to ask. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So this particular mix here says 27 of the 80% AMI units will be formerly homeless units referred to by HPD. Now we look at the area, the AMI for the region, and it's a region calculation of $107,000. $107,000 at 80%. What target are we really going to attract, given that percentage breakdown for the AMI?
You're asking me that, Stephen? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I can certainly ask the experts in the housing area and my team and get back to you on. So you're asking what the income threshold would be for that 80%?
I have calculated the income threshold given New York City's regional AMI. And at 80%, do we think it's very likely that we will be able to attract formerly homeless to fulfill those set aside units?
Oh. I think,
I-
Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're trying to say here is that 27% of the 80% of MI units. Oh, wait.
I don't know the answer to this, to be honest with you. It's not my, it's above my pay grade, to be candid, but I can find out.
Yeah, we'll need to get back to you on this. Yeah, we'll get back to you on this.
It might just be a typo because it's no way possible. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, because usually we fix the units dedicated to formerly homeless are set to 20% of 20% of the AMI. So
Okay.
this might be, we'll double check. This might be an error in the presentation,
Okay,
but
thank you.
I'll find out as well.
Thank you. We could get back to us on that.
Isn't there financing that just, it's more about, like Stephen is showing how it gets financed, which is different from like what the individuals are actually paying. I think that's what's going on. There's like maybe some sort of voucher or something that makes up the difference, so that like the income that the developer gets is 80%, but the individuals are actually paying quite a bit less.
I think that's exactly right, Lauren. I don't know for sure, but that's exactly, I think, correct. I'll find out though.
Perfect. If we could get the actual answer to her, it would be great. And one other question. I know you mentioned the development team, including Operation Fight Back and Hope Community. Who is managing the residential units?
It's Richmond is managing. Richmond has a management company within it. Richmond's a very large affordable housing developer, and they have a management, Richmond Property Management, that's going to be doing the property management.
Okay, thank you. George?
Yes, thank you. So I have two questions. The first is about the parcel B, the mid parcel. This committee spent a lot of time discussing it and then recommending for approval the East Harlem Urban Design Guidelines, or the Urban Renewal Plan, which has urban design guidelines in them, and it covers this parcel. I just want to make certain, and it looks like you are, but I just want to make certain that you've been consulting the urban design guidelines in the Urban Renewal Plan, and that the design that you're showing is reflective of that.
You're exactly right. Yep, it is. I mean, S9 is well aware of it. We talk about it quite a bit. By the way, I'm sorry I'm not on video. I think I don't have the best internet connection, so I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just not on video. But yes, that was noted exactly. In fact, we talked about it a few times.
Okay, all right, great. The other question I have is for Lauren. The A East parcel was featured in a RFEI for a life sciences hub not that long ago, I think in 2018. Can you talk about whether that's still in the works, or are there any plans for that parcel other than that?
So you're right, we did include it in that RFEI, and we didn't, I'm not sure if I can say this, we didn't receive responses for that parcel. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to disclose that, but that.
No, you've disclosed that in the past. I just was wondering if there's if maybe it's still in the works, or maybe it's open for possibilities. Is there anything about your plans for that parcel?
Left-hand side.
Yeah, so we have to, it has to be commercial. So it won't be residential. And we are going to RFP it in the future. And it would be great if, just because there wasn't interest at a moment in time, life sciences there, it doesn't mean that won't always be the case. And that's sort of what we're hoping, that, by waiting a bit, we have a compelling use, which life sciences, I think, could be a compelling use because of the jobs that it generates. That said, it wouldn't specifically be an RFEI or RFP rather for life scences. So,
does a lot of life sciences are also community facility? Would it allow for that?
Yeah, there could be a component of community facility on the site. Yeah.
Okay.
It's so you more than anyone are familiar with the zoning. What it can't be is residential because we used up the residential units. I would like to see personally that, the parcel be maximized in its, and a large thing is sort of created that has, a large facility that has lots of jobs. So that is the way I've been thinking about, what could be best there.
One follow-up, if I may, Elsie. The Proton Center is underbuilt according to the allowable zoning, and the EDC reserved the floor area that could have been used on the Proton Center. Might that be used on parcel A? Is that
Exactly.
the plan? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so a substantial building can go there.
Yes, but of course, the urban design guidelines that you mentioned institute height limits, so certainly not of the height limits.
Oh, that's right. Okay, good. Thank you.
No problem. I also saw Beverly Pabon's hand up. I'm not sure if the question was answered or if you wanted to take a moment to ask your question. Beverly? No? Okay. All right. I see. I see a hand, but I can't see a name. Andrew, could you help me with the name? I can't. I see a hand up, but I can't.
Sure. So you're taking questions from the public now?
Yes, unless there are other committee.
Oh, we just have a member. We have one from the public. We'll do the member first, and then we'll get back to the public.
Okay, there goes.
So
right.
Beverly Pabon. Beverly.
Might be internet issues.
Maybe.
You're mute. You're muted, Beverly.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be technical. And I believe the hand went down. Okay, having trouble. No worries. You can write it in the chat if you are able to do that, and I will speak for you. If that works.
So we had a question in the attendees, but the hand came down. Mr. Rivera, Jose Rivera, do you have a question? There it goes.
No, that wasn't me.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, so I will allow Beverly some time to write out her question, and if she is able to, then I will come back to that, but I wanted to move on for now. So if you can guys can just hold on for a few minutes in case she does ask her question in the chat. But for now, we will, what is the next item, Angel?
Sure.
1 second, I just spilled a lot of stuff.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm having trouble on my side too, but I will have the presentation up in a second.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Orlando, I can hear you.
Testing.
We hear you.
Y'all can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm glad I wasn't cursing when we put this on thing. I'm like, what is going on? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good evening, and thanks for the thanks everyone for the presentation. This is really great that this area is being developed. I do have some questions. One of the questions was, Lauren, would we have a copy of the presentation of the sites that you spoke about? I would like to have that for my records to go over. The other question was regarding the affordability. as Yolanda was speaking of, when the AMI, the way I'm reading the presentation, hold on, I'm trying to get the presentation back because I have it on my PowerPoint. Thanks for having that up so I can go to it. Oh, come on, now work. Now this is not working. Okay. Okay, the affordability mix of the slide that I think Stephen was speaking of, it does says 27 of the 80% AMI. I was wondering also if that was 27 units of the 101 units, that's at 81%, 80% of the AMI, that's going to be for the homeless? Or is that just still a typo?
I don't think it's I mean, again, I got to get clarification. I didn't write this. I think what it means is 27 of the 80. Well, I shouldn't. I'm just going to guess at what it means. 20% of the 80% will be used for formerly homeless that will use a voucher. So that doesn't mean that's their income. But let me find out for sure, and I'll clarify it.
Right. Because the way I'm reading it is 20. If you have 101 units, that's going to be set aside for 80% of the AMI. 27 of those will be for homeless, which, like Yolanda was speaking of, no one that's homeless would be making that much money at 80% and be homeless. That I can see because the AMI numbers are so high. What I think sometimes when we put the AMI of units, that we put the money, the income of that AMI, right, be put on there. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know where this feedback is coming from. So we can get a better understanding of what the incomes are, because most of the time the 80% changes each year by HUD. So, the income level of the AMI goes up every year based on HUD's calculation. So if we have the number amount of the income, like the dollar amount, that would help a lot. When you say 80% of the AMI, we know these people are making this much income. 37% of the AMI, we know people of this income is making that, side by side with the AMI would be very helpful in presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly.
Yeah,
we will. I know, Felipe, you will get back to us with those numbers, and just like in the future, it is true if we have the AMI and the amount of the income there will help us kind of figure that out. Visualize.
Elsie, we'll work with Stephen and clarifying these 2 points. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. All right, we are gonna move on. I believe.
So you have one. You had one more hand in the public side.
Oh, thank you.
Melody Capote. Melody.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, but you're echoing.
Okay, I don't know what's going on.
Hi, Melody.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm speaking tonight as a community cultural institution located on 125th Street off of Lexington Avenue. And I wanted to say that Stephen and his team have been engaging and supportive of the community and its wishes. And we're looking forward to working with Stephen to ensure that the final product brings real cultural benefits to the community. As I think you've all heard me say many, many times, it's just unacceptable to have a sign on the corner of 125th and Lex that says that Blacks and Latinos used to live here. With the way that development is happening in our neighborhoods and in our communities, it's really important that developers partner with us and make the space and take the time to create space that becomes a footprint of what the community presently is. And so as a cultural institution that intends to be around for a long, long time. We want to thank Stephen and the team for the conversations we have had up until this point and for their attention to the fact that this is really, really important to us as a cultural community, as an artistic community, and as a community that built East Harlem. So I just wanted to make note of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. Last, we are going to try again with Jose.
No, Melody and I worked together. She said
Got
what
it.
needed to be said. Good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, Angel, our next presentation.
So thank you, Stephen, Lauren, and Felipe. We look forward to the clarification and the question from Yolanda, and we'll share that as soon as we receive it from you all. The presentation for that was just shared is on the community board website. The next is a informational presentation by Siobhan Watson regarding Nycha's climate adaptation plan. Siobhan, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody.
Before Siobhan, sorry, I just want to say have a good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having us. Take care.
Good night.
See you soon, Felipe.
All right. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm excited to talk about Nycha's climate adaptation plan. Angel, may I share my screen?
You may.
Thank you. All right, are you guys seeing the presentation, or are you seeing the presenter view?
Yes, we're seeing.
You're seeing just the slide?
We're seeing the slide with the yellow banner at the bottom.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, sometimes it's a little hard to tell which one I've shared on this. Okay, so again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Siobhan Watson. I'm a program manager in Nycha's Recovery and Resilience Department. And I have led the development of a climate adaptation plan at Nycha that sets out a number of strategies to build resilience to climate-related hazards into Nycha properties throughout its portfolio. So one of the reasons that we're presenting to you tonight is that I know that Community Board 11 and the Land Use Committee were involved in the East Harlem Resiliency Plan that Parks led several years ago. They went through a process of looking at East Harlem and the risks that it faces from both coastal flooding and stormwater flooding. So when we started talking with various stakeholders, we were introduced to Jessica, and there was a suggestion that we update you on sort of where Nycha has gone with this, particularly given the large concentration of Nycha housing within Community Board 11. So anyway, happy to be here doing this tonight. So as I'm sure most of you know, the New York City Housing Authority is the nation's largest landlord, beyond being New York City's largest landlord. It houses more than 600,000 people, wide distribution of ages, etc. We have over 2,500 buildings, 178,000 apartments. And the housing is distributed throughout the city. So when we talk about the climate hazards that Nycha housing will face, we're really looking at the whole gamut of risks and conditions that will be faced throughout the entire city. Recovery and Resilience Department was created at Nycha after Superstorm Sandy. So Superstorm Sandy hit Nycha developments pretty hard. There were 35 campuses that were particularly hard hit, and Nycha was funded to do over $3 billion of recovery work and investment in resilience after Superstorm Sandy to protect those developments that were hardest hit from the effects of a potential future similar storm. So at this point, 9 years later, Nycha has awarded most of that funding. Most of that $3.26 billion in funding is awarded. The majority of the work is completed. And just to give you sort of an overview of some of the investments that were made after Superstorm Sandy to build resilience. There were a lot of the work consists of new mechanical equipment. So new boilers, heating systems, et cetera, to replace the ones that were lost from saltwater damage, corrosion, et cetera, during the storm. While this work was happening, lighting upgrades, new entrance doors were installed in many of the developments. Over 200 buildings are slated for full backup power generation. So this top image here that you see is a generator being lifted onto a roof and set in place, providing the building the capacity to maintain full electrical and heating function in case of a power outage. And this would not only keep the lights on, keep the heating systems running and everything, but allows the sump pumps crucially to keep operating and reduce the amount of damage that any overflow flooding would create. So just some of the hot water heaters installed, again, some of these additional measures that were taken, like new security cameras. Most of the buildings in the program had their roofs completely replaced, so it provided the additional benefit of protecting the building from any leaks that were caused by just the general condition of the roofs before that. This picture on the right is an example of an annex, a mechanical annex. That one's at LaGuardia Houses on the Lower East Side. But this one is a way when there's not enough room on the roof or in the first floor of a building, for example. Many of the developments in the program had their mechanical systems moved to annexes above the design flood elevation in order to protect them. So as this work has started to wrap up and many of these projects have started to close out, Nycha has recognized that there is a need to continue to plan for climate adaptation beyond those 35 sites that were funded for investments after Superstorm Sandy. As we all saw this summer, we're getting heavier rains. Hotter summers have continued to increase their impacts, and we expect to see more coastal storms, although fortunately we have not had a coastal storm of the magnitude of Sandy since that happened. So our climate adaptation plan outlines 7 goals that I'll go through briefly that relate to how we want to approach building resilience into Nycha's properties and protecting residents from the kinds of impacts that they saw during Sandy. I'll go through all of these individually. The first one is to build resilience into all of Nycha's capital work. So as you may know, Nycha has been working to secure mechanisms to finance decades of deferred maintenance through various programs. One of those may be the Build Back Better bill that's being debated by Congress now. We hope to see an infusion of capital investment through that. But even before that bill came up, Nycha had outlined several ways to upgrade its housing quality across the board. So the first of those is PACT. So those are the partnerships with private developers that have been happening at some of Nycha's campuses. And through those agreements, the public housing transfers from Section 9, which is a public housing, the public housing section of the Federal Housing Act, and instead are funded by Section 8 vouchers. Private developers are responsible, get a 99-year lease for the property, are responsible for doing renovations and collect rent through the Section 8 program. So that allows developers to access financing and to access the higher level of funding that Section 8 vouchers receive versus Section 9 per unit. So through the PACT program, the mechanism for integrating resiliency is building it into the RFPs that go out. So understanding what the risks are across our portfolio and making sure that we include resiliency requirements and make sure that those are part of renovations that are happening when these PACT programs go through. The second one is comprehensive modernization. So this is sort of Nycha's program to do across the board housing quality upgrades itself on its own properties. So we're working closely with the department that is planning for our first comprehensive modernizations to make sure that that those renovations also include measures that will protect residents and the equipment on campuses through the lifetime of the through the useful life of the equipment. When there are component smaller scale projects, when we get funding to replace individual systems, the other strategy is just making sure that those sort of are built to a standard that looks to future climate conditions and the expected floodplains in the future, not just to the ones that we are expecting now, or that we're under now. So just some examples of that. This is Baychester Houses in the Bronx, a development that was recently renovated through the PACT program. This one was recladded, so that extra layer of insulation gives better efficiency, also better temperature regulation for apartments, which is important as we face hotter weather. Resiliency through comprehensive modernization. So Nycha went through a process of thinking through, okay, if Nycha is going to get funding to do full renovations of its properties for the first time in the agency's history, what do we need to be considering? Climate adaptation was one of the things that was put front and center in our summary of what needs to be considered to make sure that if we're making a historic investment in these properties, that we're thinking about future conditions as we do it. And then component replacement. So Nycha has a number of heating systems that are being replaced through a state allocation of funding. Where those heating systems are subject to floods, they have actually taken best practices from the Sandy recovery program and built some of those annexes that I was showing you earlier. Instead of replacing the equipment in the basements, building these side annexes, protecting the equipment, making sure that we're considering the possibility of flooding from either coastal storms or heavy rains. Our second goal here is to foster the health of Nycha's urban forest. You may not think of Nycha as having an urban forest, but we have over 1,000 acres of tree canopy in Nycha campuses. So that's about actually, I believe it's about 2% of New York City's total tree canopy cover, which is pretty incredible for a relatively small amount of land. If you look at maps of neighborhoods with high concentrations of Nycha developments, you'll see that actually a lot of the trees that are in those neighborhoods are in Nycha development. So this is two images. One is an image of East Harlem, just showing tree canopy cover. And one is Brownsville, showing tree canopy cover again. So outside of Central Park, if you look at East Harlem, those concentrations of trees are really within Nycha developments. And what the Department of Health and their kind of research on urban heat island mitigation is showing is that those heavy concentrations of trees are really key resources to cooling a neighborhood. So one tree here and there doesn't make as big a difference in cooling and mitigating the urban heat island on a neighborhood-wide scale as these higher concentrations. So we've been just really been emphasizing the importance of preserving and enhancing Nycha's tree canopy cover. So some Department of Health data actually showing the top graph is showing during a heat wave in 2019, The temperature inside, I believe this one was Carver houses, inside the campus was a full 2 degrees higher at the peak temperatures. 2 degrees lower during those heat wave peaks within the Nycha campus than just outside of it. So we really see measurable effects from that heavy tree canopy that we have. So we are working to elevate tree care, create protection standards for trees, and just work to invest in that next generation of trees so that we have those trees available to take over and provide those benefits of the trees into the future. This is actually the superintendent of grounds at Johnson Houses. We're out doing our tree inventory, which you'll see an image of in the next slide. We've been working with Green City Force. They are an AmeriCorps jobs training program that employs Nycha residents to maintain the farms at Nycha at several campuses. We've sort of created a parallel program doing some urban forestry training for residents or for the participants in that program, and having them collect the data for our tree inventory. One of the things that they've been doing in addition to just inventorying the trees is interviewing the superintendents of grounds and trying to understand, where are we seeing really good practices for tree care? Where are we seeing more challenges? And that image I showed you is just sort of one development that they highlighted as they were doing the inventory, where there just was a real culture of tree care and some practices that were being used there that showed real noticeable results in terms of the overall look and health of the trees that they saw there. So we are working with Green City Forest to create a more sustained urban forestry program to not only do a comprehensive inventory of our trees, but to create better maintenance protocols and elevate the level of care that the trees are getting, do more targeted plantings, using the tree inventory to really guide our decisions on what goes in. Number 3, we have been focusing for several years on how to expand access to efficient and reliable cooling in Nycha apartments. Department of Health research shows that those who suffer hospitalizations, illnesses from heat are most often exposed to extreme heat in their own homes. So we are looking at how to expand access to cooling, and particularly focusing on vulnerable residents. This is a resident at Meltzer Towers, where there was a pilot to do full building installations of smart networked air conditioners. So the theory there was that you perhaps would not even see an energy use increase by providing full building air conditioning if you also made sure that the units were efficient units, properly sealed to the windows, and not wasting as much energy. So that was done over the past couple of years. The entire building received Nycha owned air conditioners that can be networked in order to cycle compressors on and off, reduce peak energy demands, but still keep the apartments cool and keep people safe. So we're looking not only at pilot programs like that, but also at just considering, using heat pumps that also include cooling in future heating plant replacements, so that cooling becomes more of a standard amenity in Nycha apartments eventually. We're not there yet, but we are working on plans to use heat pumps to shift to systems that include cooling. Last year, related to this, the city ran the Get Cool program to provide air conditioners to people during the summer of 2020, when people were under, lots of restrictions of kind of where you could go to cool down. There was a real concern that people would suffer more from the heat in their apartments while trying to protect themselves from COVID. So Nycha participated in the Get Cool program, installed about 16,000 units in the apartments of vulnerable residents to try to make sure that people had access to cooling who needed it during that summer. Goal 4, so as I said, we've all experienced this recently. We've been thinking about how to protect developments from heavier and more frequent rainstorms. I believe my colleague Adam Benditsky presented to the Environment Committee actually last week about a project that he is planning at Clinton houses to manage heavy rainfall there. The Green Infrastructure Program that Nycha has been running in collaboration with DEP aims to install green infrastructure in order to manage more stormwater on site. But a prerequisite to that is actually just making sure that our existing stormwater systems are in a state of good repair. So this is a picture of a site where DEP went to install green infrastructure, but found that there was a collapsed catch basin. So before you can add on to your stormwater system with these great green features, it's important to make sure that the system as it was designed is actually working, is able to absorb that water that's going into the storm drains instead of running off into buildings or other places where it shouldn't be. So some of those projects have had to just repair the underlying stormwater system. We're looking to identify where we have problems with our just basic stormwater system function, seek funding to repair those, or again, integrate the repairs into those PACT conversions or comprehensive modernizations, and then layer that additional green infrastructure, on-site stormwater management, rain gardens, things like that on top of that. So we've been looking closely at, of course, where there were problems after Ida and prioritizing those locations for this type of work. Goal 5, so as I mentioned, the department, the Recovery and Resilience Department really came out of the Sandy program, the Sandy Recovery Program. That was entirely focused on protecting developments from coastal flooding. And part of what we did here was just to really look carefully at how coastal protection was provided at the 35 developments. Those were all done through different contracts by different developers. So we took a look back and we actually worked with the American Institute of Architects to kind of bring the private sector participants in the program together, let people really think and reflect on what worked well, what didn't work well about the program, and document those kind of lessons learned for the next time when we have to continue protecting properties from coastal flooding. This is the new boiler room at Coney Island houses. So this is one where there was an annex that was being built to accommodate the new mechanical equipment. And this was just kind of a nice one where a new community room was able to be built into that boiler room. The outdoor space was completely redesigned and provided a new look to the campus. So of course, when those co-benefits can be integrated into a project like this, that is a benefit to all aspects of it. I think the real lessons that came out of that process of reflecting back on the program were, number one, focus on critical infrastructure. So the boilers, the elevators, those really key systems that provide services to the entire development were the things that were the most expensive to replace, that impacted residents the most. So for future developments, really strategizing first about how to protect that critical infrastructure is how we will approach future retrofits. Number two is just to really emphasize a preference for passive systems. So systems that don't require somebody to go out and install something before a storm comes, just to provide that level of assurance that you know it's going to be there and be working, instead of having to be installed or deployed every time. And number 3 was just integrating resiliency features into broader retrofit plans where possible. So one development in the Sandy program, Ocean Bay Bayside, was actually being converted through the PACT program to private management when the Sandy funds were awarded. So for that development, the Sandy funds were able to be integrated into that broader retrofit. And that allowed the development to do things that weren't possible when just one component was being replaced without being part of a bigger renovation. So, just to explain a little bit more what I mean by passive protection, those elevated boiler buildings, once you put the equipment up high, when the storm comes, you don't have to go do anything special to protect it. It's already elevated, you know it's going to be protected. More of these annex buildings, just different examples of the design. At Baruch houses on the Lower East Side, a flood wall was built. So rather than protecting individual buildings, there was a sort of natural feature of the campus that was able to be modified in order to protect all of the buildings that were above it. In Red Hook, the entire campus is actually being regraded in order to protect the buildings and keep the campus traversable during flooded conditions. So a different way of doing passive protection. And then yet another way of doing passive protection is these automatically raising barriers at Campus Plaza in the Lower East Side. So there's different ways of doing it. It's not possible at every site, but it's helpful to kind of look back at the program and think through which of these strategies would really be recommended if NYCHA needed to do this again. These are developments that have deployable elements. So those are the ones where there may be a doorway, you have to go install flood logs before a coastal storm is coming. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints and then also site constraints, is a method that was used pretty extensively throughout the program. So just in terms of future risk, this is a map of East Harlem. I'm sure that in your work on the East Harlem Resiliency Plan, you saw these kinds of maps of our current floodplain, our current 100-year floodplain on the left, and then the expansion of that 100-year floodplain into other parts of East Harlem in the future. So with a lot of NYCHA properties being in East Harlem, we're really looking closely at these developments as places where we may need to look to do further coastal storm protection in the future. Some of the properties on the inner side of Jamaica Bay are another place where we are looking at future risk. Additional hazards, so beyond the 3 kind of major threats of heavy rains, coastal storm surge, and extreme heat, there's other things that we're thinking about. Monitoring groundwater rise is one of them. We're seeing groundwater coming closer to the surface in many of our coastal developments. And then extreme wind, as well as continued cold snaps that may have different impacts in the context of kind of overall warmer weather. And then finally, the last goal that we included in the plan is investing in social resilience. So I work in the capital projects division. We're very focused on the physical aspects of our developments, but of course, we always need to be thinking about how these spaces are actually used and what actually will serve the community during a climate, an extreme weather event. There's been research showing that communities that are connected, that have places that serve as community gathering places, actually have markedly better outcomes during emergencies. So investing in the kinds of spaces that can support community connectedness, outdoor spaces that provide pleasant and cooled environments, for example, are things that are capital investments that really do contribute to the opportunity for increased social resilience. And as part of that, resident input and support for what we're doing is vital. So the Capital Projects Division has recently increased created a more robust engagement process for any capital projects that happen at developments, and ensuring that we maximize participation and input into the projects that we're doing. As part of the development of the Climate Adaptation Plan, we also recruited a network of Nycha residents that we worked with Proton Center for Community Development to facilitate a number of workshops to dive deep into our goals and workshop kind of our ideas and the strategies that we proposed with this group of residents that had expressed interest in this topic and the desire to participate in the conversation. So with that, I will leave it for questions. It looks like Jessica, you have your hand up. I will stop sharing and have a conversation about what we've been doing.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, Jessica, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Siobhan, so much. First of all, it would be really helpful to get a copy of your presentation if possible.
Sure.
But I guess I just wanted to make a comment and ask a question at the end. So it seems like in general, there's not much we can do with existing buildings besides protecting the critical infrastructure and addressing issues like cooling in the apartments. And most of our resilience work is going to be within the green space around buildings. So, I think you've heard, you already know all of the work we're doing around resilience. So we look forward to working with you to bring these necessary interventions to life. And I just wanted to say that, sorry, I wrote notes to myself, that all of these things impact health, as you constantly brought up, the heat related issues and how they especially are, acting against specifically like seniors and youth, and that all of that's related to like the trees and the way that we're, treating the campuses around the Nycha buildings. But I think from reading New York City plans, social resilience that you brought up at the end, there is that can't be our only risk preparedness for New York City, right? It's great that we have social connection and can, talk to each other before and after events and translate what's going on to each other, but that's just not enough. So I'm excited about these sorts of things that are going to be real risk prevention methods. And just one quick question, are you paying Nycha residents for their time with the community engagement efforts that you've been doing? Thank you so much.
Thanks for your questions and comments. I'm just while I'm thinking of it here, I'm just putting a link to the full climate adaptation plan in the chat here in case anybody wants to dive deeper into it. Okay, so number one, you brought up emergency preparedness, and I should have said this at the beginning. Our plan really is a plan coming out of capital projects for mitigation to our developments themselves. We have an Office of Emergency Management that focuses really on emergency preparedness and deployment in the time of emergency. So and then we closely coordinate with the New York City Emergency Management Agency when they, are calling for evacuations and all of that kind of stuff. So I completely agree with you. Social resilience is not enough, and my comments about the importance of social resilience are not at all meant to replace formal emergency planning and everything else that needs to happen with that. Another comment you made was that the primary resiliency methods are outside of the buildings versus inside of the buildings. I think, yes, in terms of flooding, we really are talking a lot about retrofits. If we can use the campuses, then that is preferable in many cases to doing extremely labor intensive and expensive retrofits to entrances and lower walls and stuff like that. But much of the resilience work has happened inside the buildings, right? So it's replacing equipment, it's changing the location of equipment to make sure it's protected, things like that. And then when we talk about cooling, I focus on expanding access to cooling. Part of that is also just looking at how we can integrate the desire for cooling and spaces remaining comfortable with our simultaneous desires to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make sure that our buildings are sustainable. So we have a separate sustainability department that really focuses on those kinds of efforts. We are subject to the city's greenhouse gas emissions reductions laws. So thinking through how do we coordinate newer heating systems with also upgrading the windows, thinking about how to make sure that we're doing this in an efficient way. So I think, yes, it's partially true that the outdoor spaces are really important to resiliency efforts, but there's a lot of important stuff thinking about the building systems as well. And then lastly, are we paying residents? Yes, we paid them to participate in those workshops. We had a selection process. We had an application process to be part of that network. We had Proton Center do the actual, we sort of gave input on the criteria. We had them actually do the selection because we didn't want to be sort of picking and choosing which residents we were hearing from. And they helped us facilitate the workshops, and the residents that participated were paid.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I didn't see the order of the hands going up, but on my screen, I see George, Yolanda, and Beverly. So if you could in that order, please.
Sure, thank you. So the improvements that you were showing are really great. It's wonderful to see that Nycha is taking proactive action. You had referenced the resiliency plan that Parks did. And one of the things that we learned from that resiliency plan was that, the risk that East Harlem faces for devastating flooding during like a tidal surge is very high. It's just as high as it is in lower Manhattan. We were spared, or the East Harlem was spared the worst of Sandy, largely because of a fluke of the timing of the hitting of the Sandy hit and tides. And as you showed, there's substantial Nycha properties in the 1% floodplain, and even more in the 500-year floodplain. And I guess part of my question is, how do you prioritize? There are always limited funding, right? So how do you prioritize who gets what and when? We've been seeing, large scale resiliency measures going downtown, and we've seen like nothing large scale uptown, right? It's just not happened that way. And there are reasons for that, and they were explained to us. And they're not bad reasons, but that actually means it seems to me anyway, if Lower East Side's going to have a big wall around it, well then maybe prioritize uptown in terms of improvements on campuses, or how are those decisions being made? If you can shine some light on it, I think everybody would like to hear that.
Sure. So we've been really trying to not only think about what we want to do, but how are we going to get there and how are we going to integrate resiliency into other things that happen? Because Nycha got a huge influx of funding for resiliency after Superstorm Sandy. We don't want to wait for the next disaster to be able to invest in these protections. However, as you know, it's extremely challenging to fund everything that needs to happen at Nycha. So that's really the reasoning behind the focus that we have on integrating resiliency into retrofits that are happening, whose main purpose really is to upgrade housing quality. And so in terms of priority, there is a very clear answer to how the developments are being prioritized for those bigger renovations. And there was a memo that was signed by Greg Russ, Nycha's chair, and Danny Barber, the head of the Citywide Council of Presidents, that kind of set out a prioritization of developments based on the conditions related to lead, mold, and pests, right? So those are the kind of top issues that are driving priorities of when Nycha developments are renovated at the moment. And that's as a result of the lawsuits and the settlements that came out of that, that are being overseen by the Federal Monitor. So as we look to those, we are looking at, which ones are coming up and how can we build resilience into those renovations. And so that's one method. Again, the PACT program, they have slightly different ways that they're prioritizing which developments go through the PACT program, but there's an opportunity as the developments are renovated to create requirements around the protections that have to be integrated into those.
So to clarify, can I clarify?
Sure.
So if you're in a good, well-maintained building and don't have lead paint and mold issues, you're lower down on the priority list to getting resiliency improvements. Is that right?
Well, it's lower down on the list for the renovations, right? So my other, the third point sort of addresses what you just brought up. No, it's fine. Which is that there is pre-hazard mitigation funding available from FEMA specifically to mitigate against hazards. That's not that $3 billion just for Nycha level of funding, but they have increased the amount of funding that's available to do these pre-hazard mitigations. Congress recognized, hey, just funding communities after disasters isn't working so well. Let's make sure that a percentage of FEMA's budget has to go to pre-hazard mitigation activities. So we are looking at where our most vulnerable properties and prioritizing those for for that type of funding stream. And that's actually how Adam is seeking funding for the project that he presented the other day for Clinton houses. And that project is really aimed at stormwater mitigation and sort of uses the Nycha property to protect not just that property, but the surrounding buildings as well by supplementing the drainage system that's available in that area.
As a follow-up, if I may, are you able to provide a list of capital projects that you've undertaken in East Harlem and Nycha properties in East Harlem?
That have done for resiliency work?
Yes, for resiliency solely, yes.
Yeah, so I will say, we're seeking funding for these goals. A lot of these things are not funded, right? But there have been some of the Nycha properties in East Harlem have been part of the Sandy program. I know most of the property, most of the neighborhood was spared, but there was damage to some of the Nycha developments. So there have been some significant investments to the developments right along the coast through that program. and I can get you those, and then I will let you know. I mean, the Clinton project, and then I think there may be some other green infrastructure. I'll look into that though. I can
That would be great. I mean, you know, I saw all those pictures of wonderful improvements, and they were almost all outside East Harlem. And you know, East River Houses is entirely within the 1% floodplain, right? It's probably one of the highest risks properties that you have. And so it would just be nice to see, you know, some of that end up uptown. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yolanda, and then Beverly.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It's amazing. As an advocate for Build It back in 2012, it's amazing where we've come, but it is also amazing how far we have yet to go as it relates to having a solid resiliency plan. But my question has to do with the PAC program. You made mention, and I want to make sure that I understand this, that the developers, or I would call them property managers who have a sublease of 99 years, that there's a greater advantage for them with the Section 9 program versus the Section 8 program?
So Section 8 is the program that the developers, Section 9 funds public housing units to public housing authorities. So Nycha receives a set subsidy from the federal government on a per unit basis through the Section 9 program. Section 8 vouchers, you know, traditionally are used for the private market, as I'm sure you know, to make up the difference between what the renter can pay and the rent for the apartment. The amount that is allocated by Congress for Section 8 vouchers is higher than it is for Section 9. So that's one of the reasons for doing this, is that on a per unit basis, there is more income available when it is moved over to Section 8.
More income for the developer.
Yeah, I mean, more income to be able to properly maintain the development.
Okay, under the Section 8 or the Section 9?
Section 8.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, thank you.
Beverly?
Yes, can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the presentation. One of the slides that you showed was a generator, some generators being moved to the roof. You know, for safety and health and everything, how does that affect the apartments that's underneath it? Because I know generators, you know, that's a lot of heat during the winter time. I mean, during whenever they're used. So I want to know what was put in place for the protection of the tenants that's underneath those units.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know when they install them, they do have to create a pad to reduce the vibrations and things that would be felt underneath it. However, I want to point out that those generators are not typically used on a day-to-day basis. So those are for emergency use. They have been used because there's a demand management program. So you know, on those hot days when everybody's using their air conditioner and there's a risk of blackouts or brownouts, the utilities start using demand management programs, which is a way of reducing how much or increasing how much is being generated, and making sure that they avoid those, or trying to avoid blackouts or brownouts. So many of these generators are enrolled in demand management, which actually helps the resiliency of the electric grid in the neighborhood, because it provides that additional generating ability during those demand response times. However, that'll be, you know, a couple days a year. It's not used on a day-to-day basis. So typically those generators are off, is the answer on the vibrations and potential extra heat from those.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to share really quick, George, East River houses. Are you seeing my window here? No? I can't tell if I share. I think I did share.
Yes, I can see it. Yep.
I see a green window around it. So if you look at this, this is the scope that was done for East River houses.
Oh, awesome.
The generator on the roof, just to make sure we have some pictures of one of the East Harlem.
Yeah, that's all right. That's like the highest risk development. That's great.
Yeah, so
I was unaware.
The scope here, so this is some of that manual dry flood proofing that I mentioned. So these kind of concrete barriers that come out have flood logs that can be installed when there is a coastal storm coming to protect the building from being inundated. And then you'll see, this is not great pictures of this particular site. But I did just want to make sure I pulled one up of East Harlem. So that's a concrete flood protection wall. And then the bricks here actually replaced. You'll see a slight difference in the bricks that goes up to that design flood elevation. That's because it's a structurally reinforced wall that prevents the floodwaters from kind of caving it in. So that's a pretty typical thing that was done. It's hard to see the improvement actually when you're just walking around the buildings, but it's an incredible amount of work to go through, structurally reinforce that wall, and then create those deployable barriers around any openings. So it's one of the challenges of this type of work. You know, if you do it well, nobody sees a thing.
Yeah, no, but this is fantastic. Did you come to the community board to talk about this, or is this just something you ended up doing?
So this was designed in 2015. These projects have taken a long time to get underway. So there was an effort to do a lot of engagement at the beginning. I'll put this link in the chat too, if you want to go to look at any specific development that was part of the program. So, you know, Metro North was part of the program too. You can select that, and this PowerPoint will pop up. It just gives you the scope of what was done here. So I just don't want you to think that there's no protection for some of those.
That is really, that is, and I'm really glad you took the time to do that, because I didn't, you know, I haven't been out much over the last couple of years.
Understandable.
Room for quite some time. I did have a question. It's more of a curiosity, and to George's point about the time that it takes for these developments to be protected. In the meantime, are there any protections for residents in terms of like renters insurance, for example, or any programs that would provide assistance to residents if a storm does come before the improvements are done? What education is out there for them to know that they are in this flood zone, that they may need these protections, that these things are a possibility if we're not able to protect their buildings in time? Because we know that, you know, not everyone can afford renters insurance or whatever the case may be. So is there something that Nycha provides residents in the meantime while they're building?
Yeah, that's a good question about renters insurance. I am not aware of any programs that provide renters insurance, but that is a great suggestion. Maybe something to bring up, you know, to city council or some of our other representatives, because that does sound like a good idea for a program. The New York City Emergency Management Agency has a program where they really promote this kind of know your zone and provide educational materials. We rely heavily on them for a lot of that type of education. but we spoke with, actually one of the members of our Climate Action Network was Claudia Perez, who's the president of the Washington Houses Resident Association. And she spoke with us quite a bit about the emergency preparedness guide that she had worked to develop for her development with Star White House. And we have been speaking with the Municipal Art Society about trying to take that process that she went through and create a curriculum, provide that opportunity to other tenant association presidents to really create something in partnership with an outside organization that's tailored to their specific development. We have not yet been able to create a solid program there, but we've been talking with different partners about how we might get that going. So something to continue to look into, but yeah, unfortunately, you know, in some neighborhoods, they have these interim flood protection measures that they have put out, you know, while the bigger scale things are happening. I know, George, you mentioned, you know, there needs to be more attention to uptown. The Sandy program has allowed us to protect our most exposed developments, and we're going to work to protect the other ones that are in the next kind of potential wave as soon as we can.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Angel, you still awake? You're with us? Yay. Okay, good. Let's check in. I gotta check in, you know. So again, thank you for your presentation. It is super important, and actually learned some things about the importance and about our jungles that I didn't even know were classified as that. So I appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I think that is the last presentation we have on the agenda. Angel, if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Yes, last presentation. Thank you, Siobhan.
So I know that for our next agenda item, we are looking at old business, I think. Let me just bring that up, sorry. You have it up? Oh, we do have it.
Mm-hmm.
This is you or George, Angel.
We're gonna tag team it. So Elsie had asked me to look at some of the projects that the committee had reviewed recently. Some of the projects that are pending and development, anticipated development. So I just prepared a list of those. On the left, some of the development projects, and on the right, since we had that wave of text amendments from the Deposit Administration, I listed those separately. So what I'm doing now, what we're both doing now, is just kind of giving an overview, a sentence or two on each one of these, and then the idea is that we're going to be circling back in more detail, that the committee is going to be circling back, and we're going to be circling back to each one of these in more detail over the coming months. So the Sendero Verde Building B was the first part of the larger Sendero Verde project to go into active development. And any of you that have attempted to drive down Park Avenue and been frustrated, that's as a result of the Sendero Verde project. So the first phase is the Building B part is quickly approaching completion, and it's anticipated that it'll open up for the lottery in the next couple of months. So that should be pretty soon. It won't open up Park Avenue. That's a longer issue. Building A is further, off in the future. We'll give updates as we get more information when they can, commence construction on that. Then, as we referenced earlier, there are the four, were four, now are three, publicly owned sites, POA sites, that were commitments from the 2017 East Harlem rezoning. The first two of which I spoke to earlier during announcements are the 25th Precinct parking lot, and the East Harlem Multi-Service Center, which HPD has selected the designated the developers for. And like I said earlier, we'll have those developers coming to the Land Use Committee to give an update on those projects. A significant number of residential units in both of those projects. Community facility use, commercial space in both of them, but they're in a better place to give the finer details than I am. Then the third one is, which is still kind of a pending thing, but I did want to, mention here is the lot currently used by the Manhattan Cleaning Unit of the Department of Sanitation, which is on 123rd Street and Lexington Avenue. It's kind of like a mid-block or just off of Lexington. And adjacent to that is, some existing residential property, buildings that are owned by Hope Community. Hope Community had put forward a proposal to the city to incorporate that POA site together with their existing properties to develop a new project that would be 100% affordable. The community board, offered its support and in terms of a letter for that concept. HPD had originally intended to issue an RFP for just the mid-block lot cleaning unit site. We do have to circle back and see what, if any, traction there has been in terms of Hope's request and our support. Councilmember Ayala is also supportive of that proposal. So we'll have to circle back with HPD to get updated information on where, if anywhere, that proposal has landed. Then there was actually I missed one, but there were the two NCP sites. One is the one at the single building at 2 East 130th Street, which was part of the Central Harlem cluster. We'll have to get updates for that. And the second one, which I neglected to add here, is the Las Raíces multi-site NCP project that will be developed by Ascendant. That was, recently came to the board, and we offered support for. We'll need to get some updates on that as well. Then there's the East Harlem Scholars High School project, which has been under construction for a while. They partnered with a local organization on local hiring, so we should be following up with them on where they landed in terms of those commitments. Then two proposals are, another proposal is the Ascendant's response, a proposed project via HPD's Share NYC program to develop an SRO, a shared housing, which is targeted to LGBTQ youth, which we heard, a few months back, and we were excited about. Then there's this one was a little further back, I think pre-pandemic, Tall Props 126th Street proposal, adjacent to AK houses. There was a request from the community board to get an update from the developer regarding the housing violations, existing housing violations at part of properties that they own on that block, on that super block. So we'll have to circle back with that. And then more recently, the board offered its support for the Fortune Society's proposed Castle 3 project. That was just this past month. Again, we'll circle back with more details in the coming months. Well, beginning next month and then in the months to follow. George will speak on the text amendments.
Great, thank you, Angel. So zoning for coastal resiliency, you recall that the community board said yes with conditions on that one. And you weren't alone. 35 community boards voted yes on it, 4 voted no, and 2 did no objection. All the borough presidents, all the borough boards, they were all in favor, and the CPC passed it in March, and there were no changes to it. It was amazing. I've got to say that for hundreds of pages of zoning text, which is what that was, for it to fly through like it did was amazing. I can tell you that there was exactly one person who testified at the city council hearing, and that was me. It was like, this was like, you never get this kind of unanimity in New York City. Okay, elevate transit, zoning for accessibility. Community Board 11 voted to disapprove with conditions, but 35 community boards voted yes, 7 voted no, and 6 had no objection. A lot of the bonus didn't affect most community or many community boards, so no objections makes sense. Borough boards were in favor. The borough presidents were in favor, except for Staten Island. And the CPC did something they don't always do. They listened to the testimony, they listened to the community boards, and they made 2, I think, rather significant changes based upon comments. And I think 1, based upon one of your comments, or at least probably others submitted it as well. But right now, the way it came out to you was the bonus could be done for accessibility, but it could also be given for things like environmental improvements and beautification. So if you had an already accessible subway and there was no work to do on accessibility, that you could put in new tiles or something like that and still get the bonus. And the CPC changed that. They said, you have to have an accessibility improvement or a capacity improvement. You can do other things on top of that, but you like beautification to, if it's not a very big accessibility improvement, you can do beautification on top of that. But you have to do something in that subject area, which I think was the absolute right thing to do. And I think that's a comment that you had made. They also revised the findings for the special permit to make it a little bit tighter. And again, this is a smart thing for them to do, because they could give the special permit, which would waive all, you could waive all height and setback regulations under the special permit, even if the improvement or the easement didn't affect the building in question. The whole idea is that you could make an improvement at a station 500 feet away and still use the special permit, and even though you had no infrastructure in your building. And they changed it so that you had to have some sort of infrastructure, or some sort of effect in your building to get the special permit, which again, I thought was a really good thing. This is the way it's supposed to work, right? Where you make comments and the people have testimony and they fix things on the back end. It was great. Okay, so moving on, the hotels. Hotels was controversial. You voted to approve it. There were 27 community boards approving it, 16 disapproving it, and 16 no recommendations. The borough boards, one of them voted to approve, the others didn't vote on it. Borough presidents, 3 approved, 1 disapproved. The CPC approved it with minor changes to improve the findings that needed to be made to give a hotel a special permit to be placed. And the CPC passed it 9-2. There was a lot of really impassioned testimony on this one. There were a lot of the civic organizations. The RPA came out strongly against this. They thought it was a big mistake. And there were a lot of no's from the community boards and others, but it was passed. It has not become law yet. These next 3 are still in the city council phase. So there may still be changes after city council sees them. Okay, health and fitness, I'm sorry, fresh, yes. No, I'm sorry, health and fitness first, I'm sorry. Health and fitness, you voted to approve. All Manhattan community boards voted to approve. However, there were 12 disapproval recommended for community boards, mostly in Staten Island and Eastern Queens. This health and fitness was to, as a reminder, was to get rid of the special permit for gyms, to make gyms and other physical culture establishments as of right, like other commercial activities are. And I guess out in Eastern Queens, they like to have that sort of power over the placement of these things. this kind of flew right by the CPC. This is something that the CPC wanted to do. There was a vote of 10-1, the one being the representative from Staten Island. Fresh, also, you voted to approve it. It was 19-2 in the community boards approving it. BP's approved it. And it really flew through the CPC unanimously with one minor change, having to clarify the purpose and need of it. So anyway, I think the real news here, and open restaurants, that hasn't been heard yet. That will be on a, I've heard it's a special meeting next Monday. It will be heard by the CPC. Really the news here is the fact that you made comments, you voted to disapprove, you made comments on Elevate, and they made changes to it. Again, you weren't the only one making comments, but they seem to be responsive changes to your comments, which is, why we all do this.
Thank you, Angel and George. I just really wanted to, thank you, but also to the committee, say that this is something that I really want to start incorporating into our old business. It's just kind of looking back and taking a look at what we've done, where we still have to circle back. Sometimes we, just are so bombarded with action items that we forget to kind of look back and check in, and people kind of get away with not responding to our questions or answering some of those. So this is just a good reminder to what is out in the universe, currently out, still needing action, and also to hear that those text amendments do come through and how we fare in terms of other community boards and how those votes look across the field, gives us an idea of where we're going and if we're moving in the right direction, and also what we may have missed. It's always kind of good to look at for future text amendments or future actions in general. I do encourage you all to take a look at most of these things, if not all, and I think all are on our community board website. You can take a look through some of the presentations, familiarize yourself if you see it on an agenda coming up for a update or something like that. You may want to look at some of the questions that were asked through some of our committee meetings. You may see some of the questions that were answered, so that we can move to the next level of asking those questions and getting some more responses if they have not come back to us with those things. And then kind of familiarize yourself also with like our points of agreement, or the urban, all of these things that you hear, and agreements that we've made, and suggestions that we've done, past budgetary items, past district needs. All of these things are kind of embedded in there to kind of get a sense of where the community board has taken a stance and what our opinions are and have been in the past. And if there are changes that need to be made as the community board changes and get new faces, we can address those things and bring those up for conversation. And I know that, in the recent past, we have a lot of conversation around supportive housing and what does that mean. So knowing our stance on those things and being able to address those things as they come up, when a project does come up, we can look to the decisions that we've made to kind of guide those conversations and make sure that we are just staying on top of everything, because there is a lot that we are in at the same time. So it's good to kind of know exactly who the players are as well. So thank you so much for giving us that. And we're going to try to keep on top of this moving forward in old business, just to make sure. And I know that you guys love these presentations so much to us. So we're doing it. Angel, you're not muted.
I do. That's exactly right. What you should be doing. You got to look back and see how effective you are. Yeah. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we are going to actually, I think, hit the button. Thank you. We will be going over a review of our budget at our next meeting. But what is this? Provide more housing.
So I listed out the 3 requests that you had. I put one each per slide. But if you want to, you're saying that you want to skip that to next month, so I'll just move ahead.
Yeah, and also because I know that both Jason and Andrew were not here today, are both part of the budget process and can also speak to some of these things, but they are there. We will be discussing them with business next month and following up on that. So hold me accountable, guys. New business, a new business, Angel?
I don't have any new business. I had something to say, but not new business.
Every time you come on camera, I'm ready for you to speak. So
I can't raise my hand as the host, so that's my way of saying I want to speak.
we got you. All right, you may take the floor.
It's like an encouragement to myself and also to you all and to the broader membership. And so we know who the next mayor is going to be. And, over the next couple of months, we'll start hearing, who the selections are going to be deputy mayors, who the selections are going to be to head different departments. And I think that'll give us, it'll begin to paint a clearer picture of what, the actual policy agenda is going to look more like than the campaign, language. So I would encourage folks to keep their eyes open to that. I do recall, when De Blasio was elected, there was an anticipation, and then you started hearing who the deputy, for example, deputy mayor for housing and economic development was, and then it was a different, that really was it Alicia Glenn. That is not what a lot of people were anticipating from the campaign. And it really painted a different picture of what to expect going forward. So I just encourage folks, I have read, what Mayor-elect Adams's housing platform is, for example. It seems a bit light on details. It seems a bit TBD. So I think it's important for us to really be, on the lookout for any hints as to what his, actual policy agenda is going to be. And just this last thing, I know because when I started here, it was in the heels, it was at this very time in the Bloomberg administration. And now we're finishing up the de Blasio, and it is, drastically different. These mayors make, incredible change. It is beyond night and day. It was one extreme or one particular thing for Bloomberg. Let's say that's fairer. And then very, very different with, de Blasio in terms of policies and actions and results. Now we're at the tail end of de Blasio, and he's just, getting beaten up, because that's what happens with mayors when they're wrapping up. Fair or not fair, that's not what I'm talking about, but he's just catching it. But there are things that were done during these last 8 years, and, to compare them to things that were done or weren't done in the previous administration, I think is educational. That's all.
Oh, it's very good points, and appreciate you bringing that back up to our brain. Just gonna look through the committee and see if anyone has any new business, anything that they'd like to say before we wrap up. If not, I will adjourn. Must we do roll call at the end of this, Angel?
Yes.
No.
And you need someone to do minutes.
Oh. I should have done that beforehand.
You can email them afterwards, but just putting it out there.
Okay.
So I'll call the roll. Yolanda Brown.
Present.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
James Horton.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Andrew's excused. Robert Perez.
Present.
Vinnie Torres is absent. Jason is excused. Candy's absent. You have quorum.
Thank you. Have a good night, all. Hopefully some of you have tomorrow off. Enjoy it. Thank you to all the friends for that.
Have a good night.
Have a
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.